bitter winter wind sliced through Joanna's thin jacket as she trudged home after her bartending shift, fingers numb and cheeks stinging from the cold. The abandoned train tracks loomed ahead, a shortcut she usually avoided but desperately needed tonight, her worn boots crunching against frozen gravel as she quickened her pace. A flash of expensive fabric caught her eye, incongruous against the urban decay, and she stopped abruptly, heart hammering against her ribs. A teenage boy lay crumpled near the rusted tracks, his pale face ghostly under the flickering street lamp, designer clothes a stark contrast to the grime surrounding him. Joanna dropped to her knees beside him, pharmacy textbooks tumbling from her backpack as she frantically checked for a pulse. Relief washed over her when she felt the faint but steady rhythm beneath her fingertips, though the boy remained unresponsive despite her gentle attempts to rouse him. With trembling hands, she searched his pockets for identification, finding instead a sleek phone with a lock screen showing missed calls from Dad. Desperation overriding hesitation, she pressed the callback button and held her breath as it connected on the first ring. "Where the hell are you, Colin?" The voice that answered was razor-sharp, controlled, but unmistakably dangerous, sending an involuntary shiver down Joanna's spine. The calculated patience in his tone suggested a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Sir, I'm not Colin. I found a teenager unconscious near the abandoned train tracks on West Maple," Joanna explained hurriedly, her voice steadier than she felt. "He's breathing but won't wake up, and your number was the last one he called." A tense silence followed, broken only by what sounded like a glass being set down with deliberate control. "Describe exactly where you are," the man commanded, his voice now eerily calm, "and do not move him or leave his side until I arrive." Within minutes, the quiet night exploded into controlled chaos. Black SUVs materializing from nowhere, men in tailored suits fanning out with military precision. At their center stood a tall figure whose mere presence seemed to alter the atmosphere, his expensive overcoat flapping in the wind as he strode directly toward Joanna. Steel-gray eyes assessed her with clinical detachment as he knelt beside his son, checking vitals with practiced efficiency before nodding almost imperceptibly to one of his men. "You stayed with him when others would have walked away," he remarked, his gaze returning to Joanna with unexpected intensity. "I'm a nursing student," she replied, hugging her arms against the cold, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked among these men with their concealed weapons and silent communication. "He needs medical attention." His breathing pattern suggests it could be neurological. The man, who introduced himself only as Mr. Kovac, surprised her by offering his card, expensive paper heavy between her frozen fingers. "My son has a rare condition," he stated flatly, watching his men carefully transfer Colin to a waiting vehicle. "You showed both intelligence and compassion tonight." 3 days later, Joanna's rickety apartment buzzer rang unexpectedly, revealing a suit-clad driver with an envelope containing an address and a staggering job offer. The elegant script detailed a position as Colin's personal medical companion, with compensation that would eliminate her student loans overnight. Standing at the crossroads of her ordered, struggling existence and a door into the unknown, Joanna stared at the card long after the driver departed. The prestigious North Philadelphia address belonged to a family name whispered in fearful tones throughout the city, the Kovacs Empire, built on blood and secrets. Morning classes forgotten, Joanna researched furiously, uncovering sparse but chilling details about Viktor Kovac, the chess prodigy turned ruthless businessman, whose legitimate enterprises barely concealed his control of the city's underworld. What terrified her most wasn't his rumored brutality, but how tempting his offer felt in her freezing apartment. The Kovac estate sprawled behind imposing gates, centuries-old stone gleaming against manicured grounds that seemed to exist in a different reality from Joanna's world. Security personnel tracked her approach with subtle earpieces and concealed weapons, their respectful nods barely masking their assessment of this newcomer. Viktor Kovac awaited her in a study that smelled of leather and power, afternoon light casting his sharp features into stark relief. "Colin's episodes are becoming more frequent," he explained without preamble, sliding a medical file across his immaculate desk. "The household staff are trained for basic intervention, but they lack your instincts." Joanna scanned the extensive documentation of a rare neurological condition, causing unpredictable seizures and unconsciousness, precisely what she'd suspected that night by the tracks. The experimental treatments listed would cost more than she could earn in a lifetime, explaining both Colin's survival and his father's desperate search for solutions. "You'll have your own suite adjacent to my son's rooms, Full access to our medical facilities, and a private driver, Victor continued, studying her reaction with the same intensity he might analyze a business adversary. In return, you provide 24-hour monitoring with the discretion that our family situation requires. The family situation became immediately apparent as Joanna settled into her new quarters. Colin's mother had vanished years ago, leaving behind whispered rumors and a collection of untouched perfume bottles in a locked bedroom wing. The mansion staff operated with military precision, their carefully neutral expressions revealing nothing about their employer. Colin himself proved to be a study in contradictions. Brilliant but isolated, his medical condition having shaped a childhood devoid of normal teenage experiences. His initial hostility toward Joanna barely concealed his exhaustion with being treated as perpetually fragile. "Another nurse to follow me around and report to my father," he muttered during their first meeting, intelligent eyes challenging her from beneath a fringe of dark hair. "Let me guess, you'll pretend to be my friend while counting down the hours until your shift ends." Joanna surprised both of them by pulling up a chair instead of retreating from his anger. "I'm actually not a nurse yet, just a student who tends bar to pay tuition," she replied honestly, setting aside the formal medical chart. "And I don't do pretend friendships. They're too exhausting." The mansion operated on unspoken rules that Joanna absorbed through careful observation. Certain rooms remained off-limits, business associates were never acknowledged outside official meetings, and Victor's sudden appearances and disappearances were never questioned. The household staff's polite distance gradually warmed as they recognized her genuine concern for Colin. 3 weeks into her employment, Joanna encountered Victor in the kitchen at 3 a.m., his usual imposing presence softened by rumpled hair and the absence of his tailored suit jacket. He acknowledged her with a slight nod before returning his attention to a stack of documents, their usual employer-employee dynamic temporarily suspended in the liminal space of early morning. "He asked about school today," Victor remarked without looking up, referring to his son with the careful tone of someone discussing a precious but volatile investment. "He hasn't mentioned wanting to return since the incident last year." The gradual shift in household dynamics centered around mealtimes, with Joanna's stubborn insistence that Colin needed normalcy as much as medication. Victor began appearing at dinners that had previously been solitary affairs, his initial stiff formality gradually yielding to genuine engagement with his son's academic interests. Victor's associates viewed Joanna with undisguised curiosity during their brief encounters, their calculated assessment of her position in the household hierarchy evident in every interaction. A particularly imposing lieutenant named Breslin watched her with particular suspicion, his whispered conversations with household security ceasing abruptly whenever she appeared. Walking the mansion's perimeter one evening, Joanna stumbled upon a heated exchange between Victor and an elegantly dressed man whose veiled threats regarding unstable investments carried unmistakable menace. The conversation ended abruptly when they noticed her presence, Victor's expression shifting seamlessly from cold fury to neutral acknowledgement. Colin's condition manifested without warning during breakfast. A dropped glass, the only prelude to his eyes rolling back as his body stiffened and then convulsed violently. Joanna moved with practiced efficiency, clearing space and positioning him safely while the kitchen staff froze in momentary panic. Victor appeared within seconds, his face a careful mask that failed to hide the fear in his eyes as he watched Joanna stabilize his son. The crisis passed in minutes, but the aftermath lingered in the mansion's tense atmosphere and Colin's embarrassed withdrawal to his room. "You handled that well," Victor acknowledged later, finding Joanna monitoring Colin's vital signs after he'd fallen into exhausted sleep. "Most people panic or overreact. You remained completely focused." The episode created an unexpected shift in Colin's attitude toward Joanna, his defensive walls crumbling slightly as she treated the incident with matter-of-fact compassion rather than pity. When she suggested adapting his medication timing, rather than restricting his activities further, his surprise was palpable. "Dad usually adds another security detail or cancels my plans whenever this happens," Colin confided during their afternoon chess match, his fingers hovering over a knight. "Everyone treats me like I might shatter if they speak too loudly." Joanna recognized the psychological damage caused by excessive protection. Colin's medical condition had become his entire identity, overshadowing the intelligent, wry-humored teenager beneath. With cautious determination, she began introducing controlled normalcy into his carefully regulated life. The music room became their sanctuary, Colin's remarkable piano talent emerging from years of solitary practice as Joanna encouraged him to teach her simple melodies. His confidence grew with each session, pride replacing embarrassment when his father occasionally paused in the doorway to listen. Victor found Joanna reviewing Colin's extensive medical records one night. Her nursing textbooks spread across the library table alongside journal articles she'd specially requested. "You're looking for something specific," he observed. Not a question, but an assessment. His usual distance temporarily suspended by shared concern. "His condition doesn't match the typical progression pattern," she explained, pointing to anomalies in test results that had been overlooked by specialists accustomed to deferring to Victor's influence rather than challenging his expectations. "I think the current treatment protocol might be addressing symptoms rather than causes." The specialized neurologist Victor summoned the following day confirmed Joanna's suspicions after extensive testing. Colin's condition stemmed from a rare autoimmune response rather than the genetic disorder previously diagnosed. The revised treatment plan offered the first genuine hope for improvement rather than mere management. Colin's first successful day at the private tutors without a medical episode became a quiet celebration, with Victor returning early from business dealings to join them for dinner. Something subtle had shifted in the household dynamic. Joanna no longer felt like an employee, but something undefined and increasingly essential to both father and son. The careful distance Victor maintained began showing hairline fractures, a lingering glance across the dinner table, fingers briefly touching when passing documents, conversations extending beyond Colin's care into the realm of personal history. His legendary control remained intact, but Joanna sensed the effort it now required. Victor's business associate Breslin interrupted one such conversation with urgent news delivered in hurried whispers, their eyes darting toward Joanna with unmistakable suspicion. The familiar cold mask descended over Victor's features as he excused himself, but not before Joanna caught a glimpse of something dangerous awakening behind his carefully composed expression. Later that night, passing Victor's study on her way to check on Colin, Joanna overheard a conversation that chilled her blood, mentions of territorial disputes and leverage that confirmed her growing suspicions about exactly what kind of empire Victor Kovac controlled. The world she had entered was far more dangerous than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. The mansion's security doubled overnight, additional guards appearing at all entrances, and Colin's activities restricted once again without explanation. When Joanna questioned the changes, Victor's response was measured, but final. "There are people who would use any perceived weakness against me, including my son's condition." Joanna found herself unconsciously cataloging Victor's rare, unguarded moments. The way his expression softened when Colin played piano, how his hands betrayed tension through barely perceptible movements. Each observation chipped away at the fearsome reputation that preceded him throughout Philadelphia's underworld. A cryptic phone call interrupted their dinner, Victor's demeanor shifting instantly from engaged conversation partner to calculating strategist. The transformation fascinated Joanna, how completely he could compartmentalize, stepping between worlds with practiced ease while everyone around him scrambled to adjust. "You're not afraid of me," Victor stated matter-of-factly one evening as they reviewed Colin's improved test results in his study, the accusation hanging between them like smoke. "Everyone fears me except my son, and now, inexplicably, you." Snow fell in thick curtains outside the study windows as Joanna considered her response, the mansion unusually quiet around them. "I fear what you're capable of," she admitted finally, meeting his gaze directly. "But that's different from fearing who you are." The distinction visibly startled Victor, his careful composure slipping just enough to reveal something vulnerable beneath the calculated exterior. He stood abruptly, moving to refill his glass as though needing distance from a conversation that had veered into dangerous territory. Colin's unexpected question over breakfast, "Are you dating my father?" sent coffee splattering across the morning newspaper as Joanna choked in surprise. The teenager's analytical gaze missed nothing, cataloging the lingering glances and shifted dynamics with the same precision he applied to chess strategies. "He actually talks when you're in the room," Colin continued, his matter-of-fact observation cutting through Joanna's stammered denial. "Before you came, sometimes days would pass with just business discussions and medical updates. Nothing real." A charity gala at the city's art museum pulled Victor reluctantly into public view, his carefully cultivated business persona requiring occasional social appearances despite his preference for operating from the shadows. Colin's improved condition allowed him to attend alongside his father for the first time in years. Joanna found herself included without explanation, a midnight blue gown delivered to her suite with jewelry that probably cost more than her entire college education. The unspoken expectation hung in the air. She would accompany them not as staff, but as something undefined. The glittering event revealed another facet of Victor's world, the legitimate business empire that laundered both money and reputation, transforming a criminal enterprise into respectable philanthropy. Society elites circled him with nervous deference, their practiced smiles never quite reaching wary eyes. "The woman who tamed the beast," whispered a champagne-emboldened socialite when Joanna stepped away from Victor's side momentarily. "Everyone's wondering exactly what hold you have over Philadelphia's most dangerous widower." Victor's hand at the small of her back when they rejoined the crowd felt simultaneously protective and possessive, the casual intimacy of the gesture belying their undefined relationship. His usually impenetrable expression flickered with unmistakable jealousy when the museum director engaged Joanna in animated conversation. The night air carried a biting chill as they stepped outside, Victor's suit jacket settling around Joanna's shoulders in a gesture so automatic it surprised them both. Something unspoken passed between them, the careful boundaries they'd established blurring beneath the winter sky. Colin's knowing smile when Victor's hand remained intertwined with Joanna's during the drive home communicated volumes: approval, hope, and the satisfaction of a perceptive teenager proven right. The mansion that had initially felt like an elegant prison had somehow transformed into something dangerously close to home. The illusion shattered the following morning with Breslin's urgent arrival, his hushed conversation with Victor in the hallway, containing fragments about monitoring and leverage that sent ice through Joanna's veins. Victor's careful mask slipped back into place when he noticed her presence, but not before she glimpsed genuine fear in his expression. The black sedan appeared with increasing frequency on Joanna's weekly visits to her apartment to collect mail and check on her elderly neighbor. Initially dismissing it as paranoia, born from months in Victor's suspicious world, she couldn't ignore the same vehicle idling outside her pharmacy class 2 days later. "You're being followed," Victor confirmed that evening, his controlled fury evident in the too precise way he set down his pen when she mentioned her concerns. "I've had security tracking the surveillance since it began last week. They're professionals, but not mine." Photographs spread across Victor's desk revealed grainy images of Joanna at various locations, entering her apartment building, shopping at a corner market, meeting her former roommate Penny for coffee. The methodical documentation of her routine sent a chill down her spine more effectively than any overt threat. The university library provided unexpected sanctuary, as Joanna researched Philadelphia's criminal landscape, carefully constructed queries yielding information about the Kovacs operation and their primary rivals, the Westbrook family, whose territory bordered Victor's with increasing friction. Recent police reports documented escalating violence between the organizations. Colin's improved health allowed him to begin limited attendance at an exclusive private academy, his father's security detail disguised as ordinary staff monitoring from a careful distance. The fragile normalcy they'd constructed felt suddenly threatened by unseen watchers tracking their movements. A private investigator hired by Victor confirmed Joanna's worst fears. Someone had accessed her medical school records, investigated her student loans, and interviewed her former neighbors. The systematic intrusion into her life extended to phone records revealing regular calls to her former roommate Penny. "They're building a profile," Victor explained, his voice clinically detached despite the muscle ticking in his jaw. "Identifying pressure points, relationships that could be leveraged, standard procedure before making a move." The mansion's security protocols tightened further, staff movements restricted, and external communications monitored for potential breaches. Victor's business operations moved underground, meetings held in rotating locations with twice the usual security presence scanning for surveillance. Joanna's former roommate Penny called unexpectedly one afternoon, her voice tight with forced casualness as she suggested meeting for coffee, to catch up on everything. The unusual phrasing combined with Penny's avoidance of specific details triggered warning bells that Joanna couldn't ignore. Victor's security team confirmed Joanna's suspicions within hours. Surveillance footage showed Penny being approached by an unidentified man outside her workplace 2 days earlier. The brief interaction ended with her accepting an envelope before hurriedly looking around to see if anyone had noticed. "It's a trap," Victor stated flatly, studying the footage with narrowed eyes. "They'll be waiting to grab you both, using your friendship as the perfect lure to draw you out of our security perimeter." Joanna's phone buzzed with increasingly urgent texts from Penny over the next 2 days, each message more desperate than the last. Claims of financial emergencies, an urgent need to meet becoming suspiciously insistent. The manipulation was obvious but effective, preying on Joanna's protective instincts. Colin sensed the growing tension, his perceptive gaze tracking the whispered conversations and security briefings that punctuated daily routines. "They're using your friend to get to you," he observed one evening, his adolescent directness cutting through pretense. "And they're using you to get to my father." The carefully constructed bubble around their lives developed hairline fractures as Victor's business associates began arriving at unusual hours, hushed strategy sessions extending deep into the night. Joanna caught fragments of conversations about territory encroachment and supply chain disruptions, suggesting a coordinated attack on the Kovacs operation. Her nursing textbooks provided unexpected strategic value as Joanna created a detailed map of Penny's likely movements based on medical school schedules and habitual routines. Victor studied her analysis with growing respect, incorporating her insights into security planning with the same consideration he gave his most trusted lieutenants. The elegantly scripted note arrived with Penny's student ID card, delivered by courier directly to Victor's business office rather than the mansion, a deliberate message that their security had already been breached. The photograph accompanying it showed Penny bound to a chair, fear evident in her eyes despite the defiant tilt of her chin. "Such a shame to involve innocent students in business matters," read the message signed simply with the Westbrook family crest. "However, your new household member has complicated negotiations by providing medical stability to your greatest vulnerability." Victor's glacial calm as he handed Joanna the note terrified her more than any emotional outburst, his controlled breathing and perfectly steady hands signaling a man retreating into the coldest, most dangerous aspects of himself. Only his eyes betrayed the murderous calculation occurring behind his composed exterior. The demands were explicit. Joanna would provide detailed information about Colin's condition, treatment protocols, and emergency response procedures, essentially creating a blueprint for exploiting his medical vulnerability. In exchange, Penny would be released unharmed with enough money to relocate and finish her education elsewhere. "They want me to choose between betraying your son and sacrificing my friend," Joanna whispered, the impossible decision settling like lead in her stomach. "They're betting I'll either give them what they want or run, either way destroying what we've built here." Colin found her staring blankly at the mansion gardens, the ultimatum clutched in her hand as she contemplated options that all led to unbearable outcomes. His unexpected maturity surfaced as he sat silently beside her, offering companionship without demands until she finally showed him the letter. "Dad will kill them all," Colin stated with disturbing certainty, his matter-of-fact assessment chilling in its accuracy. "He'll burn everything they care about and salt the earth afterward. It's who he is when threatened." The realization hit Joanna with stunning clarity. She had fallen in love with Victor Kovac despite knowing exactly what he was capable of, her heart recognizing the complex man beneath the fearsome reputation. The same hands that gently steadied his son during medical episodes had undoubtedly ordered executions without hesitation. Victor found them still sitting together, as sunset painted the gardens in blood-red hues, his expression unreadable as he assessed them both. "I've instructed my men to prepare for various scenarios," he informed them, voice deliberately neutral. "But the decision must be yours, Joanna." The operations center established in the mansion's east wing buzzed with controlled activity. Surveillance feeds, tactical planning, and weapons preparation occurring with military precision. Victor's organization had mobilized with frightening efficiency, his legitimate business operations suspended as resources diverted to a singular focus. Breslin's obvious disdain for involving Joanna in planning sessions dissolved when she identified critical weaknesses in their proposed extraction scenarios. "Penny has a severe shellfish allergy," she explained, marking potential holding locations on their map. Any site near seafood processing would require them to have epinephrine on hand. The waterfront warehouse district narrowed their search parameters significantly. Infrared scans of buildings in the area, revealing a single location with appropriate security measures and recent electrical usage patterns. Victor studied the information with cold precision, his tactical mind processing variables and calculating risks. "I won't be responsible for turning you into someone like me," Victor stated unexpectedly as they finalized plans, his hand covering hers briefly across the tactical map. "Once this boundary is crossed, there's no return to the person you were before." The burner phone delivered by Westbrook's courier connected Joanna directly to the operations mastermind, a woman whose cultured voice carried absolute certainty in her own power. "You have 24 hours to decide which life matters more to you," she informed Joanna coolly. "Your friend's actual life or your boyfriend's son's quality of life?" Joanna's response surprised even herself. the calm in her voice belying the thundering of her heart. "I'll bring Colin's complete medical file to the exchange," she agreed, ignoring Victor's sharp glance across the planning table. "But I need proof of life first. Penny on video, today's newspaper visible." The proof of life video arrived within hours, Penny's forced smile betraying her terror as she read the scripted message, assuring Joanna she was being treated well. The bruise darkening her cheekbone told a different story, igniting a quiet rage that Joanna hadn't known herself capable of feeling. Victor watched her closely as she analyzed the video's background for clues, his assessment shifting subtly from protective concern to professional respect. "You're not planning to actually give them Colin's medical information," he stated, recognition dawning in his eyes as she assembled a modified file with subtle but dangerous inaccuracies. "I'm giving them exactly what they expect. A desperate friend willing to betray your family to save someone she cares about," Joanna replied, her fingers steady as she adjusted medication dosages and emergency protocols in ways that would appear legitimate but potentially catastrophic if implemented. The modified files completed, Joanna faced Victor across his study as midnight approached, the weight of their impending operation settling between them. "You've transformed this household in ways I never anticipated," he admitted, rare vulnerability bleeding through his carefully maintained facade. Colin insisted on being included in the tactical briefing, his analytical mind processing operational details with surprising sophistication for a 14-year-old. "If they've been watching us, they know about my episodes," he observed thoughtfully. "We should use that assumption against them." Breslin grudgingly incorporated Colin's insights into their approach strategy, using the appearance of his condition as tactical misdirection while positioning extraction teams. The teenager's contributions earned him newfound respect from Victor's men, previously inclined to view him solely as a vulnerability requiring protection. "I need to be the one who goes to the exchange," Joanna insisted, cutting through the objections of Victor's security team with quiet determination. "They're expecting a desperate nursing student, not a professional tactical unit. Any deviation will put Penny at immediate risk." Victor's absolute stillness as he processed her request spoke volumes, the war between his tactical judgment and personal feelings playing out in microscopic expressions only Joanna had learned to read. His eventual nod carried reluctant acceptance, wrapped in barely contained fear for her safety. The safe house Victor brought them to contained an unexpected ally, a police detective whose longtime friendship with Victor predated his criminal empire. "I can't officially know about this operation," the detective explained, sliding unofficial building plans across the table. "But the Westbrook family crossed a line bringing civilians into play." Joanna absorbed the tactical training compressed into 6 intense hours, her medical background providing unexpected advantages in understanding pressure points and vulnerable anatomy. Victor's men treated her with increasing respect as she mastered basic self-defense techniques with determined focus. "Take this," Victor instructed, pressing a sleek phone into her palm hours before the exchange. "It looks standard but has military-grade encryption and a panic button that will activate immediately if you're in danger. One press, and we come in regardless of circumstance." The final preparation involved Victor's hands cupping Joanna's face, his carefully constructed walls completely absent as he studied her features with unbearable intensity. "You've become essential," he admitted, the simple statement carrying more weight than any grand declaration could have. Colin hugged her fiercely before she departed, his gangly teenage frame suddenly seeming much younger in his fear. "You changed everything here," he whispered against her shoulder. "Please come back so we can see what else changes." The exchange location, a semi-abandoned factory complex on the waterfront, loomed in the distance as Joanna approached alone, clutching the falsified medical file and forcing herself to project the terrified desperation expected of her. The weight of Victor's specialized phone in her pocket provided her only connection to the team positioned invisibly nearby. The warehouse door scraped open at her approach, revealing the elegantly dressed woman whose voice Joanna recognized from their phone conversation. "Ms. Bennett," she greeted with predatory politeness, motioning Joanna inside with manicured fingers. How refreshing to see someone who values friendship above newfound luxury. The warehouse interior stretched cavernously around them, support pillars creating shadowed alcoves where armed men stood at strategic intervals. Penny sat bound to a chair at the center of the space, relief flooding her exhausted face as she spotted Joanna approaching cautiously. "The medical files," demanded the Westbrook matriarch. Joanna now recognized her from newspaper photos as Caroline Westbrook, the family's ruthless acting head since her husband's imprisonment. "Complete and unaltered, I presume? or this touching reunion will be tragically brief." Joanna extended the file with convincingly shaking hands, her eyes never leaving Penny's face, as Caroline's lieutenant began examining the documents with professional scrutiny. "Everything from treatment protocols to emergency procedures," Joanna confirmed, injecting desperation into her voice. "Now please, let her go." Caroline's crimson smile never reached her calculating eyes as she signaled to release Penny's restraints. "Business is business, my dear," she remarked conversationally, watching Penny stumble toward Joanna on numbed legs. "Though I wonder if Victor Kovac will still want you when he learns of your betrayal." The moment Penny reached her side, Joanna activated the hidden transmitter with a subtle movement, the prearranged signal launching coordinated action from Victor's teams positioned throughout the warehouse complex. The main lights cut simultaneously, plunging the space into darkness broken only by emergency fixtures. "Down!" Joanna commanded, pulling Penny to the concrete floor as precise gunfire erupted from multiple directions, the tactical teams moving with military precision through darkness they had prepared for, while their opponents scrambled in confusion. Westbrook's men returned fire blindly, their bullets striking harmlessly into empty space. Victor appeared like a specter through swirling dust, his movements economical and lethal as he advanced directly toward Caroline Westbrook with singular focus. Two of her guards moved to intercept him and went down without breaking his stride, the cold efficiency of his advance terrifying in its precision. "You miscalculated," Victor informed Caroline with chilling calm, his weapon trained unwaveringly between her eyes as his men secured the remaining Westbrook forces. "You thought she was my weakness when in fact she's become my strength." Joanna focused on checking Penny's injuries, her medical training overriding the chaos surrounding them as she cataloged dehydration, contusions, and a dislocated shoulder that would require immediate attention. The battlefield calm that had carried her through the operation remained steady despite the gunfire still echoing in distant parts of the complex. "You're one of them now," Penny whispered, fear and disbelief mingling in her expression as she watched Joanna efficiently administer first aid with supplies from a hidden pocket. "All this time, I thought you were trapped in their world, but you've become part of it." Caroline Westbrook's composure finally cracked as Victor's men systematically dismantled her operation, uncovering evidence of not just the kidnapping, but extensive plans targeting Colin's medical vulnerability. "This is business," she hissed, desperation bleeding through her sophisticated veneer. "Nothing personal, just leverage." "That was your fundamental mistake," Victor replied, his voice devoid of emotion as he surveyed the secured warehouse. "You made it personal the moment you targeted my family, both my son and the woman who protects him." Police sirens wailed in the distance as Victor's detective ally coordinated the official response, ensuring the Westbrook family would face legitimate consequences while keeping Victor's direct involvement minimized. Evidence of Caroline's numerous criminal enterprises had been strategically placed for easy discovery. The warehouse's abandoned office revealed a wall of surveillance photos tracking Colin's medical appointments, Joanna's class schedule, and Victor's business meetings, all meticulously documented for months. Caroline's obsession with destroying Victor had extended far beyond business rivalry into dangerous personal vendetta, her notes detailing exactly how Colin's condition could be exploited. Breslin discovered a hidden safe containing medical supplies identical to Colin's emergency medication, but chemically altered to trigger rather than prevent seizures. The sophisticated plan had been designed not just to gain leverage, but to potentially eliminate Victor's heir entirely, a level of calculated cruelty that shocked even Victor's hardened security team. The detective quietly pocketed a flash drive containing evidence of police officers on Caroline's payroll, his expression grim as he nodded to Victor. The unspoken agreement between them, that certain information would remain between them while other evidence went official, reflected the complex moral territory Joanna had entered, where justice operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Colin broke protocol by leaving the secure vehicle, rushing toward Joanna with a mixture of relief and concern as medics attended to Penny nearby. His uncharacteristic display of emotion, hugging her fiercely before checking for injuries, highlighted how thoroughly she had been integrated into their family unit. "You came back," Colin whispered, echoing his earlier words with trembling relief as Victor joined them, his usually impenetrable facade showing hairline fractures of naked emotion. The three of them stood united amidst the controlled chaos of the operation's aftermath, a family forged in crisis rather than blood. Penny watched their interaction with dawning comprehension, the genuine care between them impossible to fake. "You didn't betray them at all," she realized, glancing at the medical file now being tagged as evidence. You set a trap, using yourself as bait. The ride back to the mansion occurred in exhausted silence, Victor's hand firmly clasped around Joanna's as though afraid she might disappear if he released his grip. The night's events had irrevocably altered their relationship, crossing boundaries that could never be re-established. Morning light filtered through the mansion windows as Joanna explained her decision to Penny, not justifying her choices, but helping her friend understand the complex reality behind the headlines about Viktor Kovac. The conversation ended with tentative acceptance rather than complete understanding, a fragile bridge between disparate worlds. I've arranged for her education to be fully funded at any medical school of her choice, Victor informed Joanna later, his practical solution to Penny's safety typically direct. New identity, relocation assistance, complete security package, she'll be protected without being confined. The Westbrook organization crumbled in the aftermath of Caroline's arrest, her empire collapsing beneath the weight of evidence compiled by Victor's detective ally. The power vacuum created unprecedented opportunity for restructuring Philadelphia's criminal landscape, with whispers of reform replacing brutal enforcement. Colin thrived in the weeks following the warehouse confrontation, his medical condition stabilizing further under the revised treatment protocol Joanna had developed. His newfound confidence extended beyond health improvements to social engagement, his intelligence finding outlets beyond the mansion's protective walls. The board has approved your scholarship, Victor announced over dinner, sliding an envelope bearing the university's seal toward Joanna. Full medical school funding, guaranteed residency. Your education continues without financial constraints. The offer represented everything Joanna had struggled for before entering their world: financial security, educational opportunity, professional advancement. Yet the clinical detachment in Victor's presentation suggested he was preparing for her departure. His careful avoidance of emotional language betrayed the assumption that she would choose to return to her former life. "I'm not leaving," she stated simply, the declaration hanging in the air between them as Victor's carefully neutral expression faltered. "This scholarship means I can finish my degree while continuing here. The best of both worlds, rather than a choice between them." Relief flooded Victor's face before he could mask it, the vulnerability in his expression more meaningful than any grand declaration. "This household, this family, functions because of your presence," he acknowledged, the admission clearly difficult for a man accustomed to absolute self-reliance. The criminal empire Victor had built began its careful transformation under Joanna's subtle influence, violence gradually replaced by negotiation, intimidation giving way to mutual benefit. His reputation for ruthlessness remained strategically intact, while his actual operations evolved toward legitimacy. Colin's 16th birthday celebration marked a significant milestone, the first time Victor allowed business associates to witness his son's academic achievements, proudly displaying Colin's science award alongside family photos. The calculated risk of revealing personal attachment signaled a fundamental shift in how Victor viewed vulnerability, no longer weakness, but potential strength. Joanna found herself mediating disputes within Victor's organization, her outsider perspective proving valuable as his business model evolved toward legitimacy. Former enforcers retrained as security specialists, protection rackets transformed into genuine safety consultations, and Victor's strategic mind applied to legal market dominance rather than territorial control. The wedding rings Victor commissioned contained metal from the emergency medical alert bracelet Colin had worn during his worst episodes, a symbolic transformation of their shared history from crisis to celebration. The gesture, private and meaningful, reflected Victor's newfound ability to acknowledge past vulnerabilities while building something stronger from them. Colin's neurologist confirmed what Joanna had suspected. His condition had been exacerbated by psychological factors, the constant stress of his environment triggering physical symptoms that proper treatment now managed effectively. The diagnosis validated her holistic approach to his care beyond medication alone. The mansion's East Wing, previously housing security operations and strategic planning, underwent renovation into medical research facilities focused on rare neurological conditions. Victor's resources directed toward scientific advancement rather than territorial expansion, his influence reshaping medical access throughout Philadelphia. Joanna completed her nursing degree with honors, her practical experience in Colin's care, complementing theoretical knowledge in ways her professors found remarkable. Her graduation ceremony marked the first time Victor attended a public event, without security concerns, overshadowing the occasion. "You've created something unprecedented," Victor's detective ally remarked during a rare social visit, observing the transformed household dynamics with professional interest. A criminal empire evolving toward legitimacy through influence rather than force. Generations of law enforcement strategy never accomplished what you've managed through compassion. The bedroom wing that had remained closed since Colin's mother's disappearance was finally opened and renovated, ghosts of the past addressed, rather than avoided, as Victor shared painful truths with both Colin and Joanna. The conversations healed wounds long festering beneath the surface of their carefully constructed lives. Victor's proposal came not with dramatic gesture, but with characteristic directness. A simple question asked as they watched Colin playing piano one evening, the domestic tranquility they'd created together more valuable than all his accumulated power and wealth. His voice held uncharacteristic uncertainty as he asked Joanna to make their unconventional family official. The wedding united disparate worlds. Joanna's university friends mingling awkwardly with Victor's business associates, boundaries between legitimate and shadow economies, temporarily dissolved in celebration of the unlikely partnership that had begun with a phone call beside abandoned train tracks on a winter night. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what allows me to continue creating content here.